To me, Chandler.
Let's do it. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning. Well, welcome everyone. Just glad to have you join us for this WeWork Supply Chain and Operations Bootcamp session on selecting a co-man. This is week 3 of the series, and I'd like to also welcome any of you that came through the last session where we talked about the decision about should you co-man or should you self-manufacture. But before we get into that, I just want to do a real quick introduction about myself. I lead the procurement and contract manufacturing practice here at JPG, and I bring to that work about 40 years of experience in the food and ag sector, including 18 years at the Kellogg Company as an agronomist. So working with the crops that we use to make the cereal products. I worked in the R&D function, quality assurance, and procurement. So those are all various elements of the supply chain over about 18 years with the company at Kellogg. And then for the last 20 years, I've been working as an independent consultant through my own shingle, a company called Origins, which is a one-man knowledge and consulting service provider to the food and ag industry. And then for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been working with JPG, helping build their supply chain practice. So thanks for the opportunity to present. Before we dive into today's subject of selecting a co-manufacturer, I want to just take a couple of minutes to recap where we were last week with the presentation as a bit of context. So we really addressed 5 questions about your time investment. What's the best use of your time? About the working capital that you have available, what's the best use of that money, about your expertise, where do you know, how does operations and running a supply chain fit into your expertise, and what you bring to the business and how you want to invest in the business. And then dealing with compliance and certification and regulatory compliance, how do you adhere to all those various elements of making a product, and might it be good to have a partner that can do some of that for you. And then the 5th one was investor relationships. What are your stakeholders comfortable with? Where do they want to be putting their money? And in the end, just a real quick recap, we concluded that to paraphrase Shakespeare, if we pose a question to self-manufacture or contract manufacturer, that is the question, we concluded that most food and beverage companies choose to work with co-manufacturing partners to enable them to scale and grow their business. So if based on that session and your other research as participants in this workshop, you're leaning towards co-manufacturing, today we'll talk and walk through some of the key considerations that you should be aware of as you work towards selecting a co-man. So let's segue to that right now. We suggest that there are really 4 key components to consider when you're looking at a co-man and deciding which one is right for your business. We'll look at capability, capacity, their culture and credibility, and then the location of their facility. So as far as capability is concerned, is the co-man an expert at making products like yours? Can they do it? Capacity, do they have the bandwidth to make it? Can the co-man produce the volume you need to scale your business long term? And then on the culture credibility front, it's really about their reputation. Are they credible? Do they and will they work well with you? Do they fit? And then location. What are factors as far as location, and how does that impact your decision? But I'd like to dive deeper into these 4 in the next few minutes. And then I'll tag on a few other things like how do you structure the arrangement, etc., a little bit later in the hour. So their capability. Is the co-man an expert at making products like yours? At the top of the list is process and product fit. Your co-man will need the basic tools and equipment, the handling and storage capability required to make your product. For example, if you're making a cookie or a biscuit, do they have an oven that can bake to the time and temperature that your product requires? And on the front end of that process, can they make the dough? Can they form the product to the piece that you want your product to be? Is it square? Is it round? Does it have an imprint on it? All those questions. And then how do they handle the product after the baking? Or if your product's a beverage, there's corollary to that, but you'll want to understand what they bring to the picture. Now, one thing to consider is that if your product is in any way unique, and it probably will be in some way, it may require some specialized equipment, a die to shape your unique cookie, for example. And the co-man may not have that in hand. So really the question comes down to, do they have the big stuff or the most of what you need to be able to run the product that you're making? In the case of a baked product, quite often that's the oven, the big piece of equipment that's requires a lot of money to invest in. And then if they do have the big stuff, then you can have a discussion with them about any specialized equipment that might be needed to make your product unique and to make sure that the expectations of your product and process can be met. And so those are discussions that you can have as you get acquainted with the co-man and their broad capability. Another important question is, what do they offer for technical support or product development? Quite frankly, it's unlikely that you'll be in the plant every time that your product is being run for your operation. So you'll want to know that they've got competent technical people that can make sure that the operation is complying to your requirements and supporting you if you want to do line extensions or other things in the future. So you can have that product process fit discussion with somebody that's knowledgeable and capable within their organization. For quality assurance and quality control, does the co-man have a QC, QA department that will work to the standards that you set and the expectations that you require for the parameters, the attributes of your product? And do they have the personnel that can monitor that and record the information, report to you the outcome of the production, so you can be assured that the production ran to the specification? Those are all things that you'll want to understand as far as the capability that the co-man can bring to the arrangement. About packaging options, co-mans will want to work closely with you on your packaging to ensure that the selected material will run smoothly on their lines. Quite often that means that you may be introduced to their preferred vendors that supply material that they know works well. The film, if you're packaging into a film, or the bottles, if it's glass or cans, whatever, it has to be able to run on their line. The other thing you want to understand about packaging is who owns it and when do you own it? When does it transfer ownership? For printed material, particularly that's unique to your brand, you'll have to have a discussion about the ownership and when does the ownership transfer from the vendor to possibly a co-man, or do you own it all the way through and just inventory a little bit of it at the co-man? So anyway, it's also a set of important discussions to have early on in developing a co-man relationship. You'll have to understand the logistics of inbound material and outbound material and warehousing. Co-mans are manufacturers. They're typically not in the warehousing business. They may store stuff for a few days on the inbound side and likewise on the outbound side while the product is being, the lab results are being verified and the quality assurance is confirmed so that it will meet the certificate of analysis. But beyond that, they're usually anxious to get it out into your warehouse or to some 3PL service. Now, they may have arrangements locally that they can refer you to that you might be able to tap into. But those are things that you'll want to understand as you look at and consider a co-man. And then just broadly, again, on certifications and compliance. Does your product require kosher or SQF BRC type certifications? Does it have to comply to USDA, FDA, or state regulations? And is the facility capable of doing that? Are there allergen constraints that you have on your product? And what does that mean for the co-man? Can they work with those allergen constraints that you have? And there's a whole host of other non-GMO, animal welfare approved, et cetera, certifications and compliance requirements that may be specific to your product or that the co-man may have for his facility. So you'll have to be very aware of that. Do know that the more certifications and qualifications like that you have, the narrower the base of co-mans that will be available to make your product can be. For example, if you're going to be top 8 allergen free, that can limit the number of co-mans that will be available to work with. And then versatility. What other processes, services, or benefits might the co-man offer in support of starting your business with them or for future growth? Do they offer competitive rates for trials and R&D experimenting that you might want to do on their line? Do they have a second line that could make a line extension or to your brand, should that be something that is part of your future? And do they have other plants that might offer risk mitigation or geographic and logistical benefits as you grow your business? So a lot of items there to consider and engage the dialogue with as you look at selecting a co-man. Now let's talk about capacity. Can the co-man produce the volume you need to scale your business long-term? Current needs for volume are an interesting one. Quite often, if you're small and starting up, the challenge is, can you meet their MOQs or their minimum order quantities? And then on the other end of the business, as you grow, is there some top line or limit to their capacity availability that may constrain how you can grow? In other words, if you grow, can they grow with you? And you want to understand what that looks like. Another element of capacity is the co-man will understand some kind of a forecast. How will you grow with them and at what rate? Particularly this year, next year, for sure, they'll want to have some sense of where you're tracking. So it's important to have that communication and discussion, which gets into growth. Can they meet that growth need, either within the current plant or maybe at another site? And do they have real estate, in the building or on land around it? They could expand if you grow and they want to grow with you. So those are all things to think about when you're having a discussion about capacity. And some of them you'll not answer immediately, but those are, again, questions that you might be aware of and want to talk about at one level or another. Likewise, for line extensions and new products, what else do they offer for opportunity? Not only for your product, but you also need to be aware of what's happening in the broader market. I think one of the things the COVID era has brought to our attention in the last 13 months is that a lot of co-mans, they've had long-term client relationships, and those clients have asked for a lot more product to satisfy grocery demand. And that has constrained what opportunities might exist for new products and new lines. So uh, you need to be aware of that and have a kind of keep a conversation with the co-man about that initially, before you select them, and then ongoing as you do business with them. You don't want to be in a situation where you're squeezed out by a bigger customer of theirs. You want to be you want to make sure that they'll give you the attention that you need and that they can do that. Scheduling is really important as far as capacity, because capacity is always a function of time, right? Who else is going to be wanting to book that month or that week or that day? So frequency of runs becomes an important discussion item. And in that discussion, it becomes a question of, are you running at MOQs, the smallest quantity, or can you make larger runs? And what does that mean for your product shelf life? And warehousing implications, and how much capital you're tying up in inventory. So how much flexibility can you offer with, and how much can your co-man offer? And what happens if you have to decrease or increase the size of a run, or sometimes even cancel a run? So what are those, what's the process that you're going to work through with the co-man on that front? Hey, Rick, one of the things I didn't really talk about here is just the implication of price and volume and MOQ, but maybe you can share a little insight on that. How do you balance those, that discussion?
Yeah, it's a real needle to thread there. Certainly early on, generally you're going to have to meet the MOQs of the co-man. So you need to find someone that is aligned with you and the size of your business at that point, but also wanting someone that can grow with you. And understanding that the smaller the run, the more frequent the changeovers from product to product, the more costly it is for your co-man. So that's going to impact what they're going to have to charge you to make your product. So if you can expand and grow your run size, or look for opportunities to work collaboratively with your co-man to optimize the process, find out what are the things that are constraining the process, whether it be capacity on the line or labor that's required, and are there things that can be done, maybe co-investments, but opportunities to improve those processes, which can then impact the cost to you as well as to your co-man, working on a collaborative basis. The other is looking at loss and scrap. I mean, the smaller the run, the more likely you're going to have higher loss of your food and packaging materials, because much of that occurs at startup and shutdown of a production run. So the longer you extend those, the less scrap loss you'll have, and which will obviously impact your bottom line there. So again, it's a matter of collaboration, working with co-man, find out what works best for both of you so you both can win, and you can share in those benefits.
Yeah, your comment about downtime had me think of something else, which is, if your product is very unique and it requires some unique tooling equipment that has to be slid into the line or reconfigured at the front end of the line or the back end of the line, those are, that takes time, and that takes investment on behalf of the co-man as far as, hours of available time. And so that all plays into how often you want to go through that effort, and what does that cost, and what does that mean for cost of goods? Because
yeah, exactly. And not only if your product is unique, but if your packaging configuration is unique, setting up packaging lines is costly and takes a lot of time. So if you're requiring moving in and out of equipment to do that, there's going to be a cost associated with that.
Yep. It may sound like it's pretty simple, that I want 6 in my pack and everybody else does 4, but that'll require some level of retooling, and that's always a good discussion to have early with a co-man. What are their what packaging configurations do they offer as standard? Because that could make life a lot simpler if you can work with a standard configuration rather than something that's very unique. Of course, that may not be what your brand needs, and then you'll have to dive deeper into that discussion. Well, great. Let's move on to the third consideration, location. Is your co-man located in the best possible area for your business? So the first three bullets here are all proximity questions, proximity to markets, to raw materials, and to headquarters. Interestingly enough, one of the questions that I get most often when we're having a discussion about doing a co-man search for a client is, yeah, I'd really like them to be really close to my headquarters, but I haven't found anybody that's within driving distance yet. And certainly proximity to headquarters for your, where your company is based might seem like a good idea, and it certainly would be nice. But by the time you look at the whole picture, it may be markets or raw materials, or even just who's out there that can make your product competitively, that's going to play bigger into the whole question about location. So and really you want to make the decision that's right for the business and in the product. And the distance is something that might well be not as big a factor in the location as you might think, particularly if we're going to go for a national market anyway, right? The distribution will go across the country, so maybe the point of origination doesn't matter quite as much. Let me just go on to a couple of the other points here. What about labor? Labor markets vary quite a bit, from state to state and region to region, and sometimes city to city. So the cost of labor will vary, and that does, particularly for smaller businesses where there might be more manual handling of product, that can factor significantly into the cost of goods sold. We're finding in the last couple of years that we've had a lot of requests for folks looking for capacity outside of California, because California has been a really tough labor market, high demand for labor. Labor's expensive there. And I'm not trying to take any business away from California, but those are just the types of questions that are being asked, and when we're talking to folks. So you might want to understand what labor would mean long-term for your product too. Certainly as you grow the business, you might want to have a discussion with your prospective co-man about, could there be plans for automation as volumes increase, so that labor costs can be mitigated as your business grows. The business climate will vary from location to location too. Sometimes there's things just as simple as federal, state, and local regulations that will make it harder to do business in a certain community than in other communities. And what would that mean for for your business? So it may mean that they can make the product, but you'll have to deal with other things like regulations that can be cumbersome. One thing we do with a lot of co-man searches is that we go North America wide. Sometimes your best options may lay outside of the US, in Canada or Mexico. And those co-mans in those countries typically have very good ways of managing cross-border shipments. In other words, they can almost seamlessly deliver the product to your US warehouse locations. So that's worked out pretty well for a number of our clients over the years. And then, that's international. The other way that plays out is just geographically within the US. There seems to be a lot more flexibility, if I can say it, between the mountains, from east of the Rockies and west of the Appalachians seems to be a bit of a sweet spot for making a lot of stuff. And so that's where you might have the best success in finding your co-man options. And that could be beneficial from a transportation perspective. And amenities. So that gets into the things like, will your co-man offer things like connections to local warehousing if they don't do it themselves, or other support services like testing labs that can be accessed quickly to turn around the lab analysis that might be needed for your product, so that quickly after it's made, it can be shipped and off to market. Another element of amenities that plays into that is, if they're not close to your head office, is there an airport close by that you can get into and out of quickly without having to spend a day and a half traveling? So somebody around Denver might be a whole lot easier to get to than somebody in the middle of Wyoming, for example. And again, I'm not trying to take a dig at Wyoming, but there's certain places that are a lot easier to get to in the country than others. And sometimes that'll play into your business decision. So let's move on to the fourth category here, which is the credibility and the cultural fit of the co-man. I often do lightheartedly refer to our JPG co-man search practice as eHarmony for companies. Because what we're trying to provide, and when you're looking at a co-man, you want to treat it as a matchmaking relationship that will, in the end, allow you to work together and kind of be in a happily ever after relationship. Because once you start with a co-man, you could be in that arrangement for a long time, and hopefully you will be as you grow your business and they provide the manufacturing of your product. So to get that to that state of a good fit culturally with your co-man, you really need to consider both their credibility and their culture. So on the left side here, on the credibility side, I've got three circles that surround that. One of them is their integrity. Are they somebody that you can trust when you have the conversations with them? Does it feel like a relationship that could work and that you can work in an arrangement of trust and transparency? And if not, maybe you have to be prepared to walk away and look at somebody else. Their credibility will have a significant impact on your brand, or could have a significant impact on your brand, because they're going to be tied to the hip with you. They're going to be intimate to your business. So it's better to get the relationship right. A couple other elements of credibility are they financially sound? Do they, are they going to be there for the long haul? You'll need a viable co-man, like in any other business relationship. You may not want to beat them too hard on price point if it results in them losing their shirt and losing the enterprise, and then you're both out of business. So and that's where the whole trust and transparency becomes very important in working with them. Are they of a mindset to work that way, so that you'll have an arrangement that works long term? And then accessibility to factory records and pricing and things like that. So will they share the outcome of the production run in a timely manner, so that you know how many pounds were made and how much raw material was used, and the quality assurance reports and the lab reports? Is all that flowing in a manner that, and will it flow, and can they talk to that well enough that you'll feel comfortable working with them in that arrangement? And then pricing. You'll want to have some kind of a decent transparency on pricing, and also what future pricing might be. You'll start at a price probably against the MOQ or your year one volumes, but where are the price break points, and are they willing to be somewhat open book about that type of a thing? What does that look like? And then let's switch over to the cultural fit side. are they kind of partnership minded? Do they have common values to yours? There's on the bottom there, communication. How do they communicate? Do they have ways of do they want to be in touch with you regularly, and are they available? And there's another element of communication, which is electronic data interchange. Some of the some information will just flow through the web, but is there a mechanism that they have that will allow that to happen? And if not, what's the way that that information will flow? Again, we talked about, are they of a mind to be a partner with you in your venture? There's a couple of things about culture I think that are important too. One is it's when business is going great. When in business as usual, a lot of this stuff can work pretty well, but you'll also have to understand when events or the quote, if I can say it this way, the shit hits the fan, or something breaks, or something doesn't get delivered, or the schedule has to change. How do all these, how do you work through that with your co-man? And you may want to pose some questions to them about how they've handled situations like that in the past, or how they handle them. How do they communicate when things are not going well? Because that there will be days when there will be hiccups in the operations. Hopefully, few of them if you articulate everything well. But you just want to be prepared and understand who they are. And we've had to guide clients to say, hey, this guy has all the technical capability of what you need to have made, but they're never going to be a good fit for you. So you may want to look at your, second best fit from a technical perspective and work with them, because culturally they're folks that you can work with and that can build your business with you. So how do we make sure this is all covered and structured well? This is, I guess we could call this one, get it in writing. There's certainly some legal documents that are important to put in place to clarify the expectations that you'll have, and you'll want to understand as you interview co-mans, how do they work in this context? And then you'll want to put the right agreements in place. So what are those, a couple of those key documents? The first one is a mutual non-disclosure agreement, which you might engage very quickly, even as you're in dialogue about the opportunity, so that they protect your confidential information and you protect theirs. Probably at the at the highest level, some of that confidential information will be your product formulations, and to which the co-man will be laying alongside their production capability. And so they may want you to respect that and keep that confidential as you bring those two elements together to make the product. But there's going to be a whole lot more information that you'll be sharing over time. And you want to make sure that both parties respect that and keep trade secrets and things like that confidential. And then the second one is the manufacturing service agreement, or the contract manufacturing agreement. They go under several different names, but it's essentially the contract that you're going to put in place. The goal here is to achieve clarity on the responsibilities and obligations of both parties for both business as usual and for when things might go wrong, because they will. A well-written document will articulate the responsibilities of both parties, and it'll cover pricing, it'll cover quality assurance expectations, it'll address volume and pricing, it'll include specifications and formulations as addendums and attachments. It'll address things like timing and when things need to be adjusted. So there's a lot of elements to consider. if you look at the list here, ownership of IP, that's always very important. We always make the argument that you, the client, will want to own the formulation for your product, and you'll have to have that clarified and understood, and it'll be documented within this manufacturing service agreement or the co-manufacturing agreement. It'll include terms and conditions of payments and things like that. Other covenants, it'll outline what insurance needs to be held by both parties, and who is liable for what. Rick, I know you speak to these manufacturing service agreements quite a bit. Anything you want to add to that?
I think you really hit the top topics there. I always like to structure such an agreement to be a transparent document, that there is full visibility from both sides with regard to costs involved with everything, so that they can work collaboratively on optimization. IP is critical, and making sure that that's well defined, even with regard to ownership of formula or any adjustments to the formula that may be made in the manufacturing process, that the brand wants to maintain ownership of that. But otherwise, I think you covered it very well.
Yeah, that last point is a really good one, because I have seen situations where the client walks in with their formula, and the co-man says, "Yeah, I'll make that for you." And then as they start up, they really need to, maybe adjust one of the ingredients a little bit or some process parameters, and then the co-man's argued, "Well, now we did that work, so now it's our formula or our process." And you just need to understand how they work and how they work with your product. So very good point. Well, so those are kind of the 4+1 things to consider when you're at least some top line when you're considering working with a co-man, and as you build out the relationship with them. So how do you go find that co-man? I just wanted to address that for a few minutes here at the end of the session. And Alex will probably spend some more time talking about this on Thursday. But what we've learned at JPG is that it's wise to make an upfront investment in searching kind of wide for who your co-man could be. In other words, it may not be good to jump at the first guy that can make your bottled beverage or your bar, because by doing that, you may not understand the full landscape, and you may have missed your best fit opportunity. So doing a broad search is something you should consider. And if you can do it yourself, by all means do that. But you want to know what the landscape looks like out there. One of the things that we do at JPG is we tend to go wide for co-man searches. We may reach out to 30. We did one where we reached out a couple months ago to 70 different possible co-mans. In the end, we narrowed it down to two or three that were the best fits. But the client really wanted us to go wide. We did go wide, and a lot of them will self-eliminate because of things like they don't have capacity or they're not a good fit. But these are all some of the factors that you need to think about. And at JPG, we do searches, but you can, you can do this yourself. The reason we do searches is most people say, "Hey, it's better for you to do this work up front for us." And some of the things that we offer reach. We've got a lot of contacts into the space. We've got a database, several databases, but in total, they reach to somewhere north of 9,000 manufacturing locations in the US that we could tap into. And then we have the experience that we can reach to hundreds of those. We've done hundreds of searches, and we know how to do them. So that might be helpful to you because it maybe can get you results quicker. We also bring an objectivity. One of the benefits of an external party possibly doing your command searches that the brand doesn't know, the command doesn't know who you are until such time as you want to be revealed. So we can do a blind or incognito search and see what the landscape looks like, and then only introduce you to those that you would like to be introduced to as prospective best fit commands. And then a couple other things that factor into command searches: how efficient can you be and how timely can you do it? And how does that fit with what your business needs as you want to get off the ground? And fortunately, because we do a lot of reaching out, we have pretty good responsiveness from many of the commands. We can get their attention. We know they're salespeople, and we can help that way. And we're not the only ones that do this, but these are some of the things that we've learned over time that do play into how fast you can get into markets. So you'll have to consider them yourself, or talk to us or other providers about that. And then, yeah, just this is kind of an illustration that we use when we talk about our services. But it's wise to think about this if you're going to do a search, or if you want to engage a command. We talk about a couple of stages. One is the scan, which is the upfront look at who's out there, who all can do my product. So that's really basically ends up resulting in a list of prospective commands, and that's very helpful because that gets you the kind of the go wide upfront look at who's out there. At that stage, we're really not vetting in detail, so it's more creating the list and at least knowing that there are 30 bar makers or bar manufacturers or 5 carbonated beverage people that I could work with, if that happens to be a product. We describe the search as the more detailed vetting, and that really is when you want to do the work of narrowing down your options to the best top 1 to 3 or 2 to 5 best fit commands that meet those capability, capacity, etc. requirements. And then from there on, you go down into setting up the arrangement, which is establishing that manufacturing agreement. And after that, you can go and scale and grow your business with them. So I think I was just hoping that that illustration might help you understand how you might tackle finding a command. So just to kind of some key takeaways here. You'll need a clear understanding of your product and prioritization of your business needs to drive your command selection process. The first important thing is to know your product, clearly understand what's important to your brand, what are the ingredients that need to be used, what are the certifications, the process requirements to make your product so that you can target the right commands. And then prioritize your needs. You'll have to make some decisions sometimes on what are your must-haves and what are the nice-to-haves, and are you ready to have that conversation with a command? And one of the places we see that play out is certifications or verifications. Does your product have to be organic? Is it important for your market? Because if it is, then that may limit the number of options you'll have. Or if it's a negotiable, then it may give you more options, and it might help you as far as who can make it and at what price point they can make it. And then protect yourself, prioritize your products and business needs, and define it all in the manufacturing service agreement so that you have clarity and your command has clarity about what the expectation is in the business arrangement that you're entering. So that's Chandler, that's kind of the overview of what we wanted to present today. On Thursday, we'll chat a little bit with Rick again, and with Alex from Claremont Foods out of Colorado, who's a co-man that makes bars, and he's just a really credible operator, and we wanted to invite him in on Thursday to be part of the dialogue and maybe answer a question or two when we talk. And of course, next week we'll get into talking about ingredient managing and planning your ingredients.
All right. I appreciate your time today, Joe, and looking forward to our discussion on Thursday. And yeah, I'll give you guys a few minutes back and looking forward to our discussion. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Chandler, and we'll see you Thursday.